We've got two headlines. Headline number one says Kretinsky wants Marco Silva at West Ham United, and the second headline is Kretinsky rejects Bilic, O'Neill and Parker. Two statements worthy of their own headline. In fact, I'm going to pinch one of them and use it for the title of this video. However, I think the real story here is that not only is Daniel Kretinsky involved in the process this time round, it is beginning to appear that he carries quite a powerful voice and vital vote in that boardroom in regards to the potential sacking of Graham Potter, but also, and perhaps more importantly, in regards to who they bring in to replace Graham Potter. Because everyone in that boardroom right now, whether it's Kretinsky, Brady or Sullivan, they are all showing behaviours of someone that knows they need to sack Graham Potter. Brady and Sullivan have met Nuno. Kretinsky's evaluating shortlists and coming up with his own candidates that he'd like to bring in to replace Graham Potter. And so hopefully you can agree with me that it appears that they know they're going to have to sack Graham Potter, or it's likely they're going to have to sack Graham Potter. If not, just go along with it for the next minute. Because that brings us on to two questions. Question number one, will you sack Graham Potter? And question number two, who will you bring in to replace Graham Potter? And until they know the answer to question number two, I think the answer to question number one is not yet. Because I don't believe they will sack Graham Potter until they know exactly who they want to come in. And if Kretinsky's now involved, but also having a big say and a powerful say, how long is this process going to take? Because I'm getting the impression now that Sullivan and Kretinsky need to agree on who they want. And until they can do that, Potter will remain at West Ham. They've already practically written off the next two games against Everton and Arsenal, saying he can stay in charge for those ones. And I thought that was, I still do think that is a bad thing. I think they should have sacked him and he's promoted Mark Robson for those two games, bought themselves time, and done what they're doing. This process now is sounding out candidates, coming up with names, coming up with their shortlist, agreeing on who they want. All the while, Mark Robson, with the help of the likes of Kevin Keane and Steve Potts, he's in charge. But us, the fan base, know, don't worry, change is coming. We've already made one. The next change isn't too far away. We're just doing the process. But that hasn't happened. What has happened is Potter's remained in charge. Whether it's because they've got blind faith, I don't really feel like that's the case for reasons we've already established. It feels like he's there until they can come to an agreement. Well, they better come to an agreement because Marco Silva is a vastly different suggestion to Slaven Bilic. We cannot afford any more delays. So if it's down to David Sullivan and Daniel Kretinsky to agree on a name, they better do it soon. So is Kretinsky being involved in this process a good thing or a bad thing? That's what I want to discuss today. But if you're new to the channel and you enjoyed the video, please do subscribe. Also do drop a like on the video as well by clicking the thumbs up button. We could get 1,000 likes. That would be wonderful. And I'm going to be cheeky. I'm going to ask for some hype. I'm going to ask you for some hype. Now, you only get 3 a week, so use them wisely. It's to do with the comments. I'm still not 100% sure how you do it myself, but you can hype a video, and I think it's better than liking the video. So I'm going to be a little bit cheeky. And if you think, do you know what? I don't mind this Scottish guy. I need a little Geo in my life. Maybe sprinkle a little bit of hype on the video. Thank you very much. Anyway, I appreciate all this support. Right, Kretinsky being involved. Let's discuss that. But before we discuss that, I want to discuss the actual reports, which is that he wants Silva and he doesn't want the other three. In regards to Silva, it just feels unrealistic. He's only got, well, he's got less than a year to go on his contract at Fulham. And he's been telling porkies, Marco Silva, he's been telling porkies somewhere. I remember at the end of last season, the very end of the season, there was some talk that he had rejected a new deal at Fulham. And he got asked about it. And he said, no, that's not the case. He said, there's been no talks. We've had no talks about my contract whatsoever. So he dismissed the rumours. Last week, he got asked about his contract. And he said, we had talks last season. Don't worry about it. Hang on. Nah. You're telling porkies somewhere, Marco. Now, I do get the impression things aren't all well between Fulham and Marco Silva because he was quite critical openly about Fulham's conduct in the transfer window. because of their director of football he likes to do his business at the end of the window. It's his strategy. It's not he failed and had to do it at the end. He wanted to do it at the end. So they brought in 4 players. 3 of them were on transfer deadline day. 1 of them prior to that. So the whole window, 1 player. Last day, 3 players. Marco Silva described it as passive. Now he's got a release clause, believed to be 9 million. Maybe there'd be a bit of negotiating there with Fulham, given that he's got less than a year to go on his contract. You'd imagine they're going to try and keep him. But with, you look at Aston Villa, let's call it uncertainty regarding Emery, that job come up. You'd imagine Marco Silva could be or should be one of the front runners for that job. And that's definitely a step up from Fulham and West Ham at the moment. I would argue staying at Fulham is a better prospect for Marco Silva than coming to West Ham United. I just feel it's unrealistic. However, I'm not against it, because I can't have it both ways. I'll sit here and whinge, and I reserve the right to whinge in future regarding the board, as in David Sullivan, their lack of determination to secure the best man for the job. The lack of willingness to pay compensation for a manager to get him out of his contract. They just don't do it. And I've always criticised him for it, and I always will. So now we've got someone in that boardroom, one of the decision makers who has a big say, apparently saying, let's go get that guy that's going to cost us 9 million. I'm all for that. Now, like I said, I don't think we will get Marco Silva. I don't think we will. But if we are now willing to spend millions to bring in a manager to West Ham United, that is excellent news. Because for so long we've restricted ourselves to the pool of free managers. If I was to ask you, I don't know why I'm saying that. Maybe there's 4 of you in the room. If I was to ask you, your mates, and do you know what? Even David Sullivan and Karren Brady. If I was to ask everybody, write down your top 10 managers you'd love to see at West Ham. Who's the best man for the job? Regardless of anything. Forget about, are they in a job? Forget that. Keep it realistic. So no Pep Guardiola. But who's the top 10? I bet you David Sullivan's list would have managers on there at the top who are currently employed. I reckon 90% of managers that would get cropped up on people's list would be in a job. At least. So with that rule of thumb, Sullivan is ruling out 90% of managers people would like to see at the club because they're currently in a job. If we get rid of that barrier of not paying compensation, fantastic news. The possibility of bringing in the right man for the job is now there. Because until you do that, and until you're willing to pay compensation, you will never be able to employ the best man for the job. It's incredibly unlikely. The best man for the job is out of work. Very, very unlikely. So Kretinsky's fighting back against that. I'm all for it. I do worry that Silva's a bit unrealistic, but in terms of the mentality and attitude, I'm all for it. Because I've never got my head around it. I'm going to take, there's transfers I could take where we've lost millions on, but I think the board's comeback would be, yeah, but if a transfer goes wrong, we can sell them. Fair. You know, we bought Skamaka, we sold him, we lost money, but we still got 25 million for him, right? A manager comes in, he does crap, we pay him to leave. You don't pay players. People pay you to take your players when they do badly, right? So you recoup some of your money. So I sort of get it, but I don't. But then when I look at the loan fees, like Calvin Phillips. Now let's pretend Calvin Phillips did well. This isn't even a criticism of his performance. Let's pretend we brought Phillips in on loan with the terms we did, which was a 3-4 million loan fee, plus his wages of 100 grand a week for 4 months. We got 4 months of footballer, and we spent millions. Probably 5 million or something we spent on Calvin Phillips for 4 months. Ignoring his, this isn't a review of his performance. This is a discussion around the mentality of being willing to spend 5 million to have someone on loan for 4 months. January, February, March, April, and a bit of May. Let's go 5, let's be generous. Versus not paying compensation for the manager. I've never understood it. I've never understood it and I never will. So I'm pleased we've got Kretinsky fighting back. I'm pleased that Kretinsky's looked at that list with O'Neill and Bilic and said no. And I've left Parker out for a reason. Because I don't think O'Neill or Bilic is the right man for the job. I don't think they're good enough to come in and definitely keep us up. I think Nuno is the best of a bad bunch. He doesn't tickle my fancy that much. But out of the list of freebies, he's near the top, right? But if you were to open it up to managers in work, he's not on the top. He probably wouldn't even be on the top 10. And the reason I leave out Scott Parker, apparently we want him, as in Sullivan and Brady. The list went to Kretinsky and he rejected him. Well, I don't believe that because of the compensation thing. There will be compensation there. Now, in regards to Parker, even if he was out of work, I'm not convinced that's Sullivan's type of manager. Premier League-wise, he's not a good manager yet. He's in the process. He may become one. He's got relegations on his CV. So far, he hasn't cut it in the Premier League. Burnley have had an okay start to the season. 4 points. Some good performances. I'm not sure he's the right manager for West Ham either. And also, here's the sad thing. I'll tell you what, this is the real sad thing. Whilst I don't think Silva would come to West Ham, I'm not sure Parker would. I'm not sure Parker would leave Burnley and come to West Ham in the state we are in today. Maybe I'd be wrong about that one. But regardless, apparently Kretinsky has poo-pooed it. I hope he is showing ambition in that boardroom. I hope he does have a big say. But it cannot prolong this delay for too long. Another game, another week. By the international break, and I mean the start of the international break, this needs to have come to a conclusion. I'm already unhappy with Everton Arsenal games, but it cannot go beyond that. It has to be wrapped up by then. And it will be David Sullivan that has to compromise. It has to be Sullivan that gives up this and starts to get on the same page with Kretinsky. Because Kretinsky, here's the thing, we should have someone in place right now that decides these things in the director of football role. Whether you call it that or you call it sporting director, it doesn't really matter. Technical director, he should be there. And that was Tim Steidten. Now, put what you think about Steidten to one side. Kretinsky at least has the right idea of having someone in place at the football club that will oversee player recruitment and will be hands-on when it comes to head coach recruitment. That position was removed by David Sullivan because he didn't like Tim Steidten, but Kretinsky had the right idea of putting that role in place. Now, he's not, from what I believe, a good chairman. Sparta Prague fans can't stand him. They hate him. And they warned him. I remember it. When Kretinsky came in, the comments from Sparta Prague fans saying, this guy's crap. He's not a good owner. You're not going to like him. So I'm suspicious of him, right? But if he can change Sullivan's mentality and get him paying compensation for the best man for the job, I'm going to like him. I'll tell you that. That would be a big tick in my book. We are such a bad club. We're not even prepared for sacking a manager. That's how bad we are. That's how badly run we are. We want to sack him. Everyone knows we want to sack him. We've met other managers and we can't because we can't agree on who we want to bring in. That needs solved big time. But there is a bit of me, I'm not going to lie, there's a bit of me that's pleased Kretinsky's in there refusing the cheap, obvious option. There's a bit of me that's pleased Kretinsky's in there throwing names like Marco Silva into the mix, saying like good managers, saying, no, it's 9 million, we're going to have to cough it up. However they get it, whether the club can afford it already, whether Kretinsky and Sullivan put in secure funding, 4.5 million between them, dilute the other shares, they increase, probably not, I mean at 9 million it's not going to move the needle much, is it? But they can pump money into that club for PSR purposes through secure funding, which counts towards, sacking your manager and hiring a manager counts towards PSR. They can get over all this quite easily, the shareholders can. It just requires a bit of ambition, a bit of money, but perhaps more importantly, agreeing in the first place.